Is NASA hiding what it knows about UFOs? My guest today thinks yes and wants to share the proof. Join me with David Sereda on Let's Talk Paranormal next. For decades, NASA has shown great interest in the UFO phenomena, and during many of their space missions, they've captured some highly intriguing UFO footage. My guest today, David Sereda, has been researching and analyzing this footage for quite some time, and has recently put together the DVD, Evidence, the Case for NASA UFOs. Welcome to the show today, David.
Thank you, Tracie, for having me here.
You're welcome. It's wonderful you could be here.
Yeah.
You do believe that there is some kind of cover-up with NASA?
Well, there's a cover-up and then there isn't. I mean, you have astronauts who have testified that they believe in the UFO phenomena, like Edgar Mitchell and Gordon Cooper, and others have reported anomalous phenomena like Story Musgrave, and there are also people who work inside the administration, like John Schuessler, who used to work for NASA, who believes in UFOs. And then you have others who will not confirm that they have made contact. So it's a debate over there, just like the UFO phenomenon is in the whole world.
Right. Well, let's start with your UFO sighting in 1968, because you had that sighting with hundreds of other people.
Yeah, I mean, in 1968, I was born in 1961 in Berkeley, California. My father was getting his PhD at UC Berkeley. And back in those days, you let your kids walk home from elementary school by themselves. And we used to, walking home from school one day, I think it was 1968, I noticed about 100 people on the street just all pointing up in the sky at this object. And back then, I was a Star Trek fan with my 4 brothers. We used to always watch Star Trek after school, and I looked up in the sky, and I thought I was looking at the Starship Enterprise. It was just a silver metallic disc, hovering, no noise. It wasn't the Goodyear blimp. I knew what blimps were back then. It wasn't an airplane. It was about 3,500 feet and probably bigger than a 747. And we watched this thing for 20 minutes. And you really get a good look at it. My brain is just recording this thing for 20 minutes. And after 20 minutes, gone. It didn't accelerate suddenly, it didn't leave, it just disappeared.
It blinked out like a light.
Into an invisible dimension. And that was the day for me that changed my life. I just couldn't forget it. I kept seeing it in my mind, and then I started having these dreams about it. They just recurring dreams of this one set of lights spinning clockwise and one spinning counterclockwise on the same axis, as if it was some sort of I believed it was a secret to their propulsion systems.
Really? Was that your only UFO sighting?
No, but that was the only daylight absolute confirmation of metallic disc. In the island of Hawaii, during the time that the humpback whales are passing, I've seen many amazing lights at nighttime that are shooting across the sky and hovering and moving over Haleakala, the volcano.
Amazing. To you, this is extraterrestrial?
I can't confirm that it's extraterrestrial. I mean, I could confirm there are certain things in the UFO phenomena that are extraterrestrial, but when I saw that UFO in 1968, part of me believed it was an advanced division of our own military.
Really?
Yeah, I didn't know. I mean, we really don't know who is on board the ship. I mean, I personally don't know on that ship that day. But I would assume it was extraterrestrial. It was 1968. It was anti-gravity. There's no evidence today, not at least in the Air Force publicly in NASA, that we're using anti-gravity technology today. But it's possible there is a black division of our Air Force that is testing these devices.
Right, because they have the black budget projects, so I'm sure that they do fund money into this kind of thing. Area 51,
Yeah, Area 51, and And Lockheed Martin, a lot of these aerospace companies have very, top secret divisions. And,
Right.
But if you consider, I mean, if UFOs, if we had them in 1968, our own technology, why haven't we used it in any military fashion? Why wasn't it used in the war in Iraq and Yugoslavia? I mean, to me, the next country that figures out anti-gravity technology is going to be king of airspace on this planet. And if you consider the great epics of civilization and what ended them, what ended the Roman Empire, what ended Alexander's era in the Middle East, was the advent of new technology. When the airplane was invented, that gave someone a military advantage. And every time there's been an advance in technology that is so superior, it always gets used to show people who has the most power.
Right.
When we dropped the atomic bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in August of 1945, the whole world stopped. No one could touch us. But when you consider what UFOs can do, high-speed turns, stopping on a dime, amazing velocities, in these UFO, there's nothing in the arsenal of military technology today, not the B-2, not the F-117.
But what about the stealth? Because some people are presuming that the stealth was taken from extraterrestrial.
Well, there may be aspects of the stealth. I videotaped the stealth bombers myself at the Edwards Air Force Base Air Show last year, and the stealth doesn't move like these UFOs move. It makes noise. In fact, I mean, it's quieter, but it makes noise. It can't hover. At least I haven't seen it hover. There are people who propose that the stealth has hidden aspects to it.
Right.
But no, I don't think there's anything publicly demonstrated. That
yeah, it was supposed to defy radar as well, but I think the whole concept with that went totally wrong.
Yeah,
people were seeing it, so it didn't defy radar.
It can defy some radar, and there are certain aspects of it that are stealth to radar. But when you see a UFO go visually invisible, that's visible stealth. That means you can't even see it. In fact, in the invisible detection of UFOs from NASA to digital cameras is an area that I focus intensely on.
Right. So your new DVD that you've put out, David, Evidence: The Case for NASA UFOs. Why did you want to produce that?
Well, it started as a book. I mean, in 1994, Martin Stubbs, program manager of a cable TV station, sent me, through a mutual friend, a bunch of space shuttle tapes throughout 1990 space shuttle missions of what appeared to be UFOs. And I was working in the physics community on helium-3 fusion. I had spoken in Congress in 1993 on helium-3 fusion in a huge panel discussion. And I had access to many of NASA's top scientists through that work. And he thought, why don't we get David to do a query at NASA and find out what's going on in these tapes? So in the beginning, I thought, really, this was going to be over very quickly. We're looking at meteorites or something that could be easily explained. But I spent, from 1994 to the year 2001, in amazing dialogues with NASA's top physicists. I kind of obviate the public people at NASA, get them out of the way and get right into the scientists. And what I found was we went into this dialogue, process of elimination, and found out that no, we're not dealing with meteorites. We're not dealing with dust and debris getting near the camera lens, as many people contend, and that there really is a true phenomena going on in these space shuttle tapes. And one of the first things I found out from Dr. Joseph Newth III at NASA, head of astrochemistry branch in the Goddard Space Flight Center in Greenbelt, Maryland, that the cameras could see, due to very advanced CCD imaging chips, invisible wavelengths.
Wow.
The human eye, we only see from red to violet, the rainbow spectrum, but beyond violet you have ultraviolet near, ultraviolet far, ultraviolet extreme, X-rays and gamma rays, which go off the chart. And below the color red you have infrared. Well, in these invisible spectra are where many of these UFOs showed up. And that just took me right back to Berkeley in 1968. I saw a UFO go invisible. And right in front of my eyes, I knew that they could be stealth, true stealth, spacecraft. And that the only way you could see them is if you could explore these invisible dimensions. Right. And that is where I started.
Right. Well, let's take a look at your DVD. Let's take a look at some of the footage. And I believe that Dan Aykroyd was also on this DVD. He was introducing it.
That was my first meeting with Dan Aykroyd. He actually read my book, every single letter, every single email and correspondence I had at NASA with many of their top physicists. And he decided to write the foreword to the book. And then I found a producer, a distributor to distribute the film, Terra Entertainment. So we decided to produce the film and show people the footage, show them the debate on both sides, and let them decide.
And David's a believer.
Dan Aykroyd is Dan's a huge believer. Dan is the most informed person in Hollywood on UFOs. And in fact, when we consider how many blockbuster films there are in Hollywood on UFOs, I mean, you have E.T., one of the top grossing films of all time, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, Star Wars, Predator, Alien, and Spielberg's newest film with Tom Cruise. All of them, and you consider all of these films have made the most money in Hollywood, next to the Titanic, and yet no one in Hollywood has ever gone public about what they know about UFOs. And Dan Aykroyd himself has not only had experiences, but he knows more about UFOs than almost any celebrity in Hollywood. Right, and we're glad that Dan is coming forward. We need someone like Dan to do that. Yeah, he's coming forward. And celebrity status. And in fact, my newest film, Dan Aykroyd Unplugged on UFOs, which hits the street May 30th this year, is going to be everywhere. Dan has come forward. Right. Wow, we're looking forward to seeing that. We're going to have a look at some of the footage from David's DVD, Evidence, the Case for NASA UFOs. And you can talk us through this, David, if you like, to see what we're seeing here. Just explain to us what we're seeing on the film. Well, this is the MIR Space Station, the Russian MIR Space Station, and we see this pulsing UFO going by. Obviously, the cameras can see into the near ultraviolet and possibly infrared as well as visible wavelength. So what we're seeing could be invisible. It has a pulse to it. Yes, it's disc-shaped. It's very low mass. It's made of light, which gets into some very advanced propulsion concepts. Many Russian cosmonauts have come forward to describe that they have seen UFOs coming near the MIR space station. What's the size of that? It's hard to determine size. It's between the space shuttle video cameras and the MIR space station, so I can't imagine it's very big. This thing might only be 15 feet across. Right. That, common sense, David, tells you that that cannot be anything to do with dust particles, ice particles, or anything else, because it looks like it's on a mission. It looks like it's on a mission. It has a pulse. Dust doesn't pulse like that. And it looks controlled. The pulse is actually part, I believe, of the propulsion system, which I get very deeply into. This one is a fireball escaping gravity. And it's so funny, some people call this a meteorite. Oh, how silly. When have you seen a meteorite traveling that slow? and how often do meteorites just come straight out of Earth's gravity? I mean, look at that. It's going way too slow to be a meteorite. In fact, according to Dr. Joseph Knuth at NASA, meteorites top at about 45,000 miles per hour. If you were seeing a meteorite going by at even half that speed, you wouldn't see it. It would have faded by now. A bullet travels at 1,500 miles an hour. You can't see that. How would you see 45,000 miles an hour right in front of your eyes? Exactly. It's too close to the camera. So obviously it has internal energy. It's escaping Earth's gravity. It's going way too slow to be a meteorite. It's not inside the Earth's atmosphere, so it can't be a gas, ball. There's no way. So. Okay, and then let's take a look at this. The high-speed turn. I mean, this is. That's incredible. This is a resemblant of many UFO sightings. Many people see UFOs making high-speed turns, sudden turns. And that, if you consider G-forces on turns, the only way you can make a turn that's fast is if your mass gravity effect of your spacecraft is near zero, meaning the ship and the pilot are as light as photons, light particles. Right. As soon as you have weight and mass and you try to turn, the G-forces on a turn that fast will kill you. Do you think that they may have, whoever they are, they may have some kind of liquid within the ship? No, liquid would still produce G-forces, and the liquid is very heavy, as you know. Right. Just imagine a bathtub full of water, and you're going 2,000 miles an hour and you turn right. The water will crush. Unless it's not water, though. Unless it's a different kind of liquid. Even a plasma liquid, it'd be too heavy. Too heavy. The G-forces on the turn would destroy you. Now, if you transform mass and you reduce mass by using, this is what I believe they do, at the center of this pulsing generator is a wave generator that transforms mass to reduce its weight relationship to gravity down to zero. Now, once you get a spaceship as light as a photon, there are no G-forces on high-speed turns, and you can do light speed on 2 volts. You don't need enormous energies required like rocket engines use. I see. So they're way beyond us. They're not. I don't even believe they're using wormholes the way we understand wormholes. Right. Wormholes require the negative energy of 100 million suns, that total solar output for an entire year. There are 100 million suns in our galaxy. That means every star in our galaxy, all of the solar energy for a year to make one little wormhole. It can't be done. But if you're zero mass, you can do a zero mass wormhole on tiny amounts of energy. So it's all about transforming the mass of the spaceship.
This may be, you know, over our audience's head, but hang in there because we've still got some great footage. So what are we seeing here, David?
Oh, this object here, this is an amazing one. This little guy, I calculate, does 1,000 miles of Earth-space distance, moves over the other side of the Earth in 4 seconds, which comes to almost 1 million miles per hour. Way too fast to be, 0.9 million miles per hour. The distance it travels over the Earth-space distance, the reason I know it's low in the atmosphere, where the red arrow is, we see it moving and curving over the curvature of the Earth, then it disappears around the other side of the Earth. There's no way that's debris near the camera lens, because if it's near the camera lens, how is it going to go around the Earth?
Exactly.
The shuttle's cameras are about, they're about 100 miles above the Earth. That's where the shuttle is traveling at. They actually travel at 300 miles above the Earth in some missions.
Right.
So we're probably at least 200 miles away from the object. It goes, which means if you can even see an object from 200 miles away, it has to be enormous in size. And then it goes on the other side of the Earth and disappears on the other side. In 4 seconds, 1,000 miles. That comes to 0.8, 0.9 million miles an hour. Meteorites are doing tops 45,000. Way too fast to be a meteorite.
Right.
This is how you win these debates, that it's not a piece of dust. How does a piece of dust go around the other side of the planet?
Yeah, exactly.
It's ridiculous.
Exactly. So NASA actually filmed these in the ultraviolet spectrum?
They have cameras, the black and white cameras on the shuttle have CCD intensifying chips that allow the cameras to see, I have confirmed this at NASA, near ultraviolet photons wavelengths as well as visible wavelengths. Some of the cameras on the shuttle are also infrared sensitive, which are also invisible to the human eye. So it's possible what we're seeing. We can't confirm that the astronauts didn't see it with their eyes, but most likely it is probably in the invisible.
Right, okay. Where do you think these ships are coming from, David?
Well, a good question. Near the end of my film, I make a hypothesis, a very strong hypothesis, that these particular craft are coming from the brightest star in the sky, Sirius.
Sirius.
Sirius is the legendary star system. In Robert Temple's book, The Sirius Mystery, he shows us how the builders of the ancient pyramids in Egypt came from that star system.
Wow.
And the goddess Isis is said to be the embodiment of the goddess from that star system. And when she and her husband visited, you know, our planet in ancient times, they taught us advanced in architecture and astronomy and space technology.
Right.
So it's possible that we're being visited by Sirians right now.
Interesting.
I know that's a very out there hypothesis, but when you see the film, you see how I deducted that. It was very scientific how I came to that conclusion.
We'll have to watch that DVD and listen to your lecture there. What are we seeing here, David?
These are two astronauts on the Hubble Repair mission, and one of the astronauts is describing where the red arrow is, that you have an object at about your 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock position going away, don't worry about it. And obviously the astronaut on the left, the UFO would be on his 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock going away, don't worry about it. And then all of a sudden we hear from ground control, whether it's in Houston or in Alabama, that they think the camera filter came off. I mean, these guys in the studio know that camera filters don't just unscrew by themselves and go floating away. I mean, it's just ridiculous.
Exactly.
These are the answers that the public officials at NASA come up with to make us believe them.
Right.
And then a lot of times they tell you what you're seeing is the planet Venus. And I think an astronaut knows the difference between the planet.
Absolutely. You would hope so anyway.
Venus is probably the greatest UFO of all time.
It is, yes, it is.
Yeah. It moves around, it jumps dimensions, it's...
Right,
yeah.
right. Now, NASA had a satellite called Polaris, and
Polaris,
Polaris, and there were water balls that were about 40 tons apparently, and were the size of houses. What happened in this situation?
Well, Dr. Louis A. Frank, who is a principal investigator on many of our satellite missions to the various planets, also National Space Award-winning astrophysicist, started noticing on his cameras on these different satellites, Polaris is one of them, that they could actually see what they thought were these 20 to 40 ton balls of water entering our atmosphere at a very high rate. of deposition. In fact, they were traveling about 35,000 miles an hour, the speed of meteorites. There were so many of them, 10 to 20 million impactors per year. They believed it was some new discovery in the solar system, that they were seeing a source of extraterrestrial water depositing itself into our atmosphere.
Now, David, how do we know it was water?
Well, Dr. Louis A. Frank says he deducts water, but when they went on the search for water, they proposed that, well, if it's water balls entering our upper atmosphere and depositing itself into the atmosphere, you should be able to see these things on infrared satellites as well as ultraviolet satellites. He only saw them in the ultraviolet, which is invisible to the human eye. So considering water, which is mass, as it strikes the upper atmosphere and sunlight hits it, it starts to heat up. And according to Dr. Knuth at NASA, you would get a temperature on the water of 300 Kelvin, which would make them infrared heat sensor beacons on infrared cameras. Not one infrared camera, COBE, IRAS, and ISO, could see these objects, which means they were non-physical.
So these things, were they traveling from the vast distances of space, or were they being formed within a close proximity to where they were then entering the Earth's atmosphere?
Well, one of the theories was that they came from the recent passing of the comet Hale-Bopp. I think Frank started observing these things as early as 1985, and they thought, well, maybe it's water tailings from the comet Hale-Bopp. But then they said that was impossible because they had been observing these things constantly, whether there was a comet passing Earth or not. So no, they weren't coming from comets. They don't know where the water balls are coming from. They are not showing up on infrared or visible satellite cameras. So these objects are invisible. And then Dr. Knuth argued at NASA that if these are really water balls and they're 40 tons doing 35,000 miles an hour, and there's 10 to 20 million of them impacting the Earth every year, what would happen to a satellite, let alone the space station, if it got hit by one of these things? Imagine a bathtub full of 40 tons of water doing that 35,000 miles an hour hitting the space station. It would destroy it. And at that natural rate of deposition, like raindrops, he said every satellite in the sky should have been destroyed by these objects, yet not one has. So there's only one possibility. It's a similar possibility to my UFO propulsion theory, is that the water balls are in a transformed state, a very high frequency, zero mass gravity state. And in that state of very high frequency wavelengths, the water balls would travel through the space station without even hitting it, because X-rays and ultraviolet can travel right through walls as if they're not even there, or they're going around them. And if they're going around them, oh my God, that would mean
it's intelligent.
It's intelligent, and NASA could say, no way, we can't deduct that theory.
Right.
But yet, it's a heated debate over there. This is one of the greatest discoveries in our solar system right now, invisible balls of water. Then I found that the balls of water, I asked Dr. Knuth at NASA, well, if it's water and hits the atmosphere and it heats up, the hydrogen and the oxygen in water is H2O, hydrogen and oxygen, would separate, and the oxygen would turn into ozone, O3. O2 turns into O3, which means, oh my God, are these things healing our ozone layer? Because as we know from coral fluorocarbons, we're destroying our ozone layer around our planet. That's why you have more skin cancer and more problems with ozone depletion.
Which would suggest then that if they are intelligently controlled, then we have beings out there who do care. For the human race.
It's possible that there's no doubt that Knuth said at NASA that they are producing a certain amount of ozone. We don't know how much. 10 to 20 million balls a year, 40 tons each of water. That's a lot of ozone. So it could be buying us a little more time. It's also possible it's an autoimmune response. The Earth knows it's losing its ozone layer. It's just like the human body. It sends out a stress call. The universe sends the answer, which is more oxygen. And then, of course, you get more ozone. But how much time it's buying us, I don't know.
And of course, we're seeing some footage of that there on screen of these balls of water.
What could be balls of water.
What could be balls of water, defying all laws of physics.
Well, we know from Dr. Knuth's report that there's the presence of oxygen, which is how he deducts that they're made of water. It's possible. And the oxygen, because of the presence of oxygen, we know they will transform into ozone in the upper atmosphere. So that something is contributing to our ozone layer right now from an extraterrestrial origin.
Why did the DoD have interest in this, David?
Department of Defense went looking for them on their satellites to confirm if they were really physical objects. And had they been truly water, you would get this 300-degree Kelvin temperature. And space is minus 273 degrees, so against the background of space, you would have this heat signature. In contrast to the cold background of space, they would be infrared beacons. So DoD went looking for them possibly because they were they could be UFOs, they could be extraterrestrial phenomena, and they were concerned. So they looked for them on all their satellites.
But what could they have done? How would they have handled this?
Well, that's when you get into the idea of, you know, if we are seeing objects coming to our planet on you know, Department of Defense satellites that shouldn't be coming in, that maybe we can monitor them, maybe we can follow them as they come into the Earth and find out where they're going, where they're traveling to. Because we have invisible sensitive cameras now, we can follow them all the way down into the Earth and see if they ever materialize or if they remain invisible. So in fact, today, you know the little digital cameras that people have now that are very popular?
Yeah.
Many of these cameras, people are on vacation and they're taking pictures of a farmer's field or the ocean, and when they come home and they download their photos, there's a metallic UFO, or very similarly, these discs of white UFOs showing up on their pictures. And if you go to ufoevidence.org on the internet, you can see a wealth of them. I mean, there are all these people, and on Coast to Coast AM, you also see people sending in photographs that they say, when I took the picture, there was nothing there, and the big triangle UFOs are showing up on these cameras.
Amazing.
And that's further confirmation of the invisible detection phenomena.
Right. Exciting
Very
stuff.
So that means UFOs could be here. There could be one hovering above your house, but you can't see it.
Right.
So they could non-intrusively be communicating with you telepathically through the dream state. Many abductions could be happening, you know, during this time when UFOs are invisible. And maybe one of the reasons they stay invisible is because they know if we materialize, you would cause pandemonium.
And that's a whole other story.
That's a whole other story.
David is going to be joining us on part 2 next week's show. More exciting, phenomenal footage, so do stay tuned. In the meantime, check out David's website, which is www.ufonasa.com. And as always, keep your eyes to the skies, and we'll see you in part 2 of next week's show. Bye-bye.